All right, welcome back to another video. Today we're diving headfirst into aerodynamics. We're working on Matt's E46 race car, and we're going to show you how to install this front splitter. So let's look at what the kit contains and dive right into it. This particular splitter was acquired from buildjournal, so obviously if you have a different setup, this is not going to apply, but this is what the kit comes with. So we're starting in the middle with the main mounting brackets. These are going to be going by your bumper impact shocks, I believe is what they're called. You have various brackets that are going to attach, including these, which are bolted to the splitter. On the outside, we have a so-called skeleton for structural reinforcement, which will be mounted to this particular bracket. And then last but not least, we have these skid rails, almost you could call them, that will be mounted from underneath for added structural support, and in case you bottom out, you have a little bit of a skid plate surface going on. I'm gonna let Matt explain what's up with these shocks because there are various versions. So
what we're looking at here, it's side support for the splitter that buildjournal recommends to purchase together with the rig. This has two main roles. One is to give it a little bit more extra support on the sides. So when the splitter loads with downforce, we don't want it to bend downwards as well as in case of an impact, it's going to absorb some of it and help extend to the original position. The side support comes with hardware, some brackets. These are going to be bolted to the splitter, and then this part is going to be bolted straight to the car, to the chassis around the bumper mount. All right, let's talk about the tools real quick. The kit is pretty straightforward. Again, this is for E46. I'm working with my 330, so it might differ a little bit compared to an M3. In my case, to remove the bumper support, I need big Torx. I think this is T50, and a 13 mil to remove the bumper support on each side. Then for the rig itself, we need very basic tools. We need 10 mil socket, 10 mil wrench, 4 millimeter Allen, and then to mark all the holes in the splitter itself, we'll need 2 Q-tips and a paint marker. And then obviously we'll need some kind of drilling device with a 1/4 inch drill bit.
Right, so speaking of Alumilite, this is what Alumilite looks like. It's a large sheet, and Matt is going to be using this instead of wood, which is pretty popular because for structural purposes, weight, where do you get it?
Usually either online or from some regional supplier that sells commercial materials. So I know that some people use this material for signs. They're not as easy to get as plywood and not as cheap, but as Nico mentioned, it's pretty light, pretty sturdy, and I think it's gonna work just fine for my purposes.
And then one more thing to be said, buildjournal does offer a pre-made splitter, but since Matt is using a 330i and not an E46 M3, that splitter would not necessarily work with your application. So that's another reason why he went with this particular choice. You do have to make it yourself. So another added challenge, but I think you're up to the task.
Oh yeah, so, totally got it.
So yeah, speaking of task, let's get to the install.
Next step, putting this skeleton bracket, the rear one. There are two options. You can put it below the subframe reinforcement or above it. I chose to put it on top of it. Just hand tight for now. There'll be a lot of adjustments happening afterwards. All right. I'm gonna cut out the splitter now. What I'm gonna use is an angle grinder and Dremel. Obviously safety glasses, there'll be a lot of mess. I've done it once before. Stuff is everywhere, so be cautious. I'm using two different kinds of tools because I have some tight curves that I need to cut out around the base of the splitter, where the big cutting wheel is not gonna do a good job there. So I'm going with a small one like this. Pretty straightforward. It's a soft material, should be easy to cut. So as mentioned before, Dremel time. I have small curves here, so let's finish up with this.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's a combination of things.
Yeah.
Where you have to get the fitment right with the bumper.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get your skeleton temporarily put in place. You got to
Right.
slide in the splitter, use your jack. So
Align it more or less with a bumper on.
yeah,
Mark the holes, take everything apart again, and pre-assemble it loosely and then do the final adjustments. Yeah, let's do that.
so at this point, the bumper is just kind of hung in place, and then you have your guide rails right here. They are hanging off the bracket in the back there. You can see that. So everything is just going to be loosely held in place. On top of that, you need a jack or something to put the splitter on, and you should be able to somewhat create a replica of what everything's going to look like when it's together. So splitter is being held in place. Rails.
Aligning the rails with the bracket. Then I'm probably gonna put a few bolts through all the brackets, just so it's more or less aligned, so I can start marking the drill holes.
Perfect.
And we're gonna pre-assemble it. Cool. So the next step with the splitter more or less aligned under the car and supported with the floor jack would be to align it more or less and measure it with measuring tape to make sure that it's even on each side and side to side and forward and back, so it's square, and also make sure that it's not rubbing on your tire.
Yeah, and in addition to that too, I mean, this is kind of a step that'll vary on your application. For example, one thing, Matt has to be careful that there's not too much protrusion due to the class that he's in. So at this point, you guys are on your own. Just take your measurements, align it however you need to. If you're doing this for stance and a show car or whatever, obviously you're not going to be bound by any limitations, but in his case, he does have to watch out for quite a few things. So
that's right.
yeah, that's just keep in mind.
Final step, we're gonna align all the parts together. So I'm gonna use this. Go for the holes that I drilled. Now the skeleton. Alright, so that's side one. Okay. Awesome. So as you can see guys, the splitter is more or less in place. I still have a little bit of fine tuning to do here and there. One of the things that I had to do was to trim the front of it to make it class legal and remove the bumper and install the side supports. And from that point, we should be good with the main task of installing the splitter. So my goal is to have this support as far out as possible to give it as much rigidity. Because as you can see, high speeds, this is definitely not gonna do any good for me. So I'm gonna aim to install it somewhere here, I would assume, which would require trimming the inside of the bumper so I can attach it to the splitter as well, to find the right place up top, somewhere around the bumper mount, to put the top screw in.
So that's kind of your safe area at this point that you're marking.
Yeah, so I imagine that the strut is gonna end up somewhere in this window at this point. For me, it's a fine balance to, one, find the right place that's gonna give me rigidity, two, that is not gonna protrude outside of the fascia of the bumper, and three, that I find the right place up top to mount the strut, the shock, whatever you call that thing, that I can also move around later on. If I change the angle of the splitter, then that would require me moving the strut a little bit up top as well. I'm gonna drill two holes here somewhere, and then another one up top, and install it like this with the safety pointing backwards so I can grab it in front of the wheel and remove the splitter when I need to. And just like that, we got a little bit more sturdy now. And as you can see, it's gonna flex and push it back where it initially was after an impact. So this is kind of cool. And then I can also put a lot of force on this. So we got the one of the side support bars in. Still have to do the other side, put the bumper back on, do fine tuning here and there. But from here, it's just the real test is gonna happen on the track and all the fine tuning with angles and whatnot. So we're gonna leave it here. We hope you learned something, and make sure to subscribe and follow our next episodes. See you next time. One more thing. This is how you test. Yeah. All right. See you next time, guys.